Yeah. Mais tu as bien fait. Tu m'as mis en haut. Non, là, je suis vraiment contente avec toi. Tu m'as gâté. Tu m'as gâté. Yeah. Please invite the journalists to come inside the room because we are expecting the Commissioner for Political Affairs, and it's very important. Economic Affairs. What did I say? No, it's not political affairs. It's economic affairs. Yes, His Excellency Dr. Maruping. We'll have to respect our time because I know other journalists will be joining us, but we don't mind because we have live transmission. Once more, I want to thank the live stream team that has been working very tirelessly to ensure that all what we do in this press briefing is followed and watched by the world. Alash. So we want to invite journalists who are in the media center and interested to know that we have now for the press briefing His Excellency Dr. Anthony Mothae Maruping, who will be talking to us about the imperative of transformation and integration in Africa, a catalytic element towards the realization of Agenda 2063. Excellency, I'll first give you the floor to quickly introduce your subject matter, and we'll take questions from the journalists. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And may I thank very much indeed those who have come for us to have exchange of views. And I expect to learn much from you as well, from this communication. Well, I will start with the imperative of transformation in Africa, socio-economic transformation. We have just gone and still are in our economies are going through a very rough patch. And we have been going through that rough patch for some time. And there are reasons for that. Three main reasons. One is the fact that there was a fall in the demand for commodities that we export. And most of our economies depend on a very narrow band of commodities, mostly from extractive industry. So when the price falls, it means foreign exchange earnings drop. It means production drops, there is unemployment, and the whole ripple or wave cascades down the system to cause misery within the economy and for the economy to go down. So that's why most of the economies that were growing marginally now came to a standstill, and some even experienced negative growth. Others that were growing very fast, they are still growing. They are still growing, but at a lower rate. At a lower, it has been dampened somewhat. Then the second cause, which happened just last year and this year, was the prolonged drought. That prolonged drought adversely affected agricultural production, and of course that caused unemployment and food supply, and where there is an export, of agricultural products, it means exports also went down. And the effects of that, negative effects, also rippled down the system within the economy. Now you can see two problems cascading down within the system. So it really means that our economy really pulling very hard, very hard. These days they call it headwinds. The headwinds were very, very heavy. As if that was not enough, United States, and by the way, I'm not accusing the United States. United States is looking after United States economy, and President Obama managed American economy very well. And they are where most economists would say they have full employment, with only between 5 and 4% of unemployment. They call that full employment in the United States. He did that very well. So for some years, there was this quantitative easing, which means pumping money in the system. In the olden times, we used to call it increased money supply. Lower interest, easy to raise loans, and so on. But after that success, they thought that it was about time now to turn the screws and tighten lest the inflation sets in. So United States, looking at the US economy, decided that maybe it was time to raise interest rates. And they did, marginally though, but that was enough because that's an enormous economy. It's a monumental economy. So even their small changes have ripples right around the world. So those rates of interest meant that the dollar became stronger. And most of our public debt is denominated in US dollars. So if it becomes strong, it means immediately the magnitude of the debt goes up without doing anything, just because the dollar is stronger. So, I mean, then the countries just found themselves with enormous debt. At the same time, imports become expensive because the dollar is strong. So when you do that, then it means now there will be inflationary pressures that are imported with that high-cost dollar now, because those are denominated in dollars. So these are the three problems, climatic change. By the way, I should have mentioned that besides the drought, some parts of Africa actually experience floods, and floods are very destructive. They destroy infrastructure, they displace people, so humanitarian interventions are required, and they spread waterborne diseases like typhoid, cholera, the mosquito, because they breed in wet areas. So it rained havoc, really. So it was a very difficult year for Africa, very difficult. But luckily, after all this, what happened? There we are. We have Agenda 2063, which is transformative, and that's why I'm going to talk about transformation. So obviously, there are three things that are required. One, humanitarian intervention, because people are starving in those areas where there were floods and droughts. And two, with debt going up and inflationary pressure growing, it means that very skillful macroeconomic and financial management is required. And then three, now it means let's get out of here. It's bad where we are. We have to transform our economies. Our economies have to be different. It can no longer be business as usual, where we rely on a few or a narrow band of commodities exports. So this is the situation. And then we have Agenda 2063. Now, what does it take to transform an economy? Well, you have to develop productive capacities in their liberal forms. That is a must. We have to do that. We have to increase productivity, make sure that productivity is higher in our economies. We have to make sure that our economies now are, in a way now, are competitive, and that there is scope for value addition, with forward and backward linkages. I'll need water. with linkages, even lateral and vertical linkages, to make sure that there is value addition. And diversification in all sectors, not just industrialization. Some people, when you say diversification, they think of industrialization. Yes, industrialization, but also even agriculture has to be diversified. It means more crops, different crops, climate-smart agriculture. It also means services. Services, have to be diversified as well. We forget about services most of the time, yet services form a large part of the economy, in any economy. In most of our economies, it's no less than 45% and higher, up to 60%. But overseas, there are some countries that rely on services so much that you find that 80% of the economy of GDP is services. So most of the time when we talk about the economy, people think of goods, but it's goods and services have value. Yes. Engineering services, medical services, tourism, hospitality services. I mean, there are so many services and they have value. And you can import and export services. So, so you need to do that to be competitive, and then investment has to go up, and then you trade, because most of the time we talk about trade, and I always, like a broken record, always say it's good to trade, but you must have something to trade, right? You must have something to sell, and you must have something to buy from the others. Then you trade. So production is very important. You have to produce goods and services in order to trade. So trade comes down the line. So this is what is required to transform our economy so that they are different. Now there is diversification, there is value addition, and then through trade now we are able to join supply chains, either intra-regional or with global partners, international trade. Now, how do we do that? Well, the how of it is that, of course, we have to develop infrastructure and energy. And infrastructure in its broad context, not just physical infrastructure, but also, things like e-networks, and communication. That's part of infrastructure, software infrastructure. So infrastructure in all its form, and energy generation, which is clean energy. Then agriculture also, climate smart agriculture becomes very important. And then we have to invest in people, to equip them with skills, so that capacity building, human capacity, and institutional building becomes very important. Then we have to devote a lot of effort on developing science, technology, and innovation. And that is not far-fetched, it's already happening. We're already having some inventions being done here in Africa by young people, particularly in the electronic field, but in other fields as well. We see them all the time being shown in the media. Thanks to you, you inform us of these developments. That has to be nurtured, strengthened, and to join the rest of the world in doing that. But technology can also be bought in the market these days. You can buy technology if you have no technology while you are waiting. And you can outsource capacity while you are building your own capacity in the meantime, so that you don't have to wait. Then industrialization, of course, but also services, strengthening the services sector. Then integration, economic integration. We will be talking about integration momentarily. Becomes very important, and so investment and trade. Now, if you look at Agenda 2063, it covers all this, but it's very key that it has 12 fast-track projects. Sometimes they call them flagship. I prefer to call them fast-track, because in strategic planning, you always have something that we say, these are the quick wins. People have to see that we mean business and we are getting somewhere. And this is what they are. But they are development in themselves. You will have time. There is something that will be distributed there. Don't worry. You will have a good bedtime reading at the back there. They are development in themselves. If we succeed, we will have developed. But also, they are also enablers. They enable more than themselves, because it's energy, it's infrastructure. There are 12 of them. If you look at them, they are also enablers. development themselves. They are enablers. And so they are very helpful, but also pave way for integration, to speed up integration. You know, things like free movement of people, the Yamoussoukro decision of 2002 about aviation, free skies, all that is promoting integration in themselves. The regional infrastructure, the e-network, you know, in the continent. All these projects have a way of promoting or going beyond the national borders. So this is where we are. Let me just say that on Agenda 26.3, we have agreed with all our partners, the UN agencies and other partners, and the Pan-African organizations and organizations operating in Africa, like even though it's a UN organization, but it works in Africa, UNICA, but they are answerable to New York, but they work here. African Development Bank, which is of course 60% African, 40% non-African, but they work here. All these people, we work with them. Of course, NEPAD, Planning and Coordinating Agency, is part of African Union. So is APRM and others, they are part of the family in any case. But all the UN agencies that are working for development here, UNDP, UNICEF, you name them, we have all agreed that national plans and the plans of regional economic communities are instruments of implementation. What will be implemented out there is what is in the national plans and what is in the regional economic communities plans. Isn't that so? So those are the instruments of implementation. And fortunately, they are already aligned with Agenda 2063 because 35 plans, among many consultations that were made, 35 out of 54 countries, that's a very high, it's almost 2/3 of plans were studied and their contents incorporated in Agenda 20. So they are already inbuilt. So there is already alignment, even though we will go into domestication of Agenda 2063 years to make sure. So we agree that plans are the instruments of implementation. We agree that, therefore, now that we have the SDGs, the global SDGs, we should incorporate both in the national plans and in the regional economic communities. So we agreed on the integrated approach to implementing and monitoring and evaluation of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. Now let me quickly remind you that to us, when you implement Agenda 2063, you are already implementing SDGs, because those 17 SDGs are encapsulated, or they are a subset of the 20 goals of Agenda 2063. It's just that the scope of SDGs is social, economic, and environmental, whereas Agenda 2063 is the same: social, economic, sustainability issues, but also cultural and political. Things like governance, they are there, they are dealt with. So Agenda 23 has a broader scope, but encapsulates the 17 SDGs. So that's why it has been decided that we implement them together. We embed them in the plans, and we implement and monitor and evaluate them together. And there will be one instrument for accountability, for monitoring and evaluation, one instrument. And there will be one report, periodic report, performance report. So indicators have been developed by those who are working on these things, including our statisticians on the African continent, you know, and a technical team of African Union Commission African Development Bank, the NEPAD Planning and Coordination Agency, and UNICA, and so on, plus statisticians. So they've worked on the indicators. And they have tried to simplify them. You know, originally, because, you know, Agenda 23, we operate at different levels. We operate at national level, we operate at regional economic community level, and we operate at continental level. You know, there are continental programs. So we work on 3 tiers. And we work with 3 domains: the public sector, the private sector, and civil society. Yeah, we remember in the past it was just the public sector. Now we have the private sector and civil society as well. So they have simplified. There were too many, so they narrowed them to 114 what they call core indicators. And then they said 114 is too much. Let's squeeze them further. So they squeezed them further down to 85 indicators. They call them super indicators, our technician. And the architecture for reporting back, we are assuming a results-based management approach, a results-based approach. So there is an architecture for reporting back. So we have the technical group that is composed of all those organizations I talk about: African Union Commission, of course, leading, then African Development Bank, then UNICA, and so on, and others, and so on. Then they report to the chief executives. Then the chief executives report to the ministers, relevant ministers. We call them, in the African Union, we call them STC, Specialized Technical Committees of Ministers. So there is one for economic affairs, which is ministers of finance, ministers in charge of monetary affairs, ministers of planning, development, planning and economy, and ministers in charge of integration. So these chief executives will be reporting to the STC, these ministerials. These ministerials will report to another body, which has just been affirmed here, which is called Agenda 2063 Ministerial Follow-Up Committee. Their task is to follow up and make sure that, because it's RBM, you know, results-based management. You know, you have to be careful with acronyms, because RBM in health is rollback malaria. But in the economic field, it's results-based management, where you trace management. Let me just conclude with integration. You know why integration? Why is it, you know, we say we want integrated this and that Africa. Why integration? Because it has benefits. And I think the case of Europe has shown that is the case. Never mind Brexit. We still think that it's positive for them to stick together. No, because with integration, you create a larger and more viable market. Instead of small units, you have one big unit. So you have a market. So if you are selling products or services, you have a larger market in which to operate. 2, you find that there will be optimal distribution of means of production, or what you call factors of production. And that will increase production. They will be distributed in a way that is optimal. And of course, there will be economies of scale. So those who are producing can produce in scale. That's the benefit. Then as a result of that, then it will be attractive to investment, both domestic and foreign investment. Because we do have investors now, things have changed. We have Dankotes, we have Motsipes, you know, who are billionaires. We have a lot of billionaires in Africa now. And they invest abroad. If here at home, there is no viable market or viable place where they can invest. So we have to attract them too, so both domestic and foreign. But also it creates a resilient economy to external shocks. In fact, I would even say even internal shocks. It will be more resilient in that manner. And then it will allow intra-regional trade that will lead us to value chains or supply chains within the region. You know, during the notorious crisis of 2007 to 2009 or something, and the ripples are still there up to now. You know, Southeast Asia was one of the regions where there was a lot of resilience. Why? Because within Southeast Asia there was a lot of value chains, value chains and supply chains there. So they were insulated. They were more resilient to that crisis than before. So with integration, there is a lot of synergies and symbiosis, or symbiosis that is helpful. Now, where are we? Well, we are late. We have to, if you are riding on the horse, you have to really now, hit this. But we have to move because we are behind schedule in terms of the schedule that was set by the Lagos Plan of Action. By now, according to Lagos Plan of Action, we ought to be having Continental Customs Union or common market by now. So my dear sister here has just told you about a continental free trade area. That is normally the second stage after preferential trade area. So we are starting at stage 2, but we ought to have passed that. We have to very quickly finish talking, start doing it, and then begin to move towards customs union, which means common external tariff now. Free trade area means no tariffs among members. Customs union means common external tariff. And from there we go to the common market, where now there is free movement of factors of production. Then we go to economic community. So even though we call our building blocks regional economic communities, none of them has reached the state of regional economic community in the real sense of what it entails, because there should be harmonized economic, financial, social policies, and we haven't reached that stage. And then we would end up with the real African Union now, where there will be common social, economic, financial, and political policies. So we are behind schedule laid down by the Lagos Plan of Action. And I have to point out that, in the olden days, you do these economic things and do social and political later. But now all these things move at the same time, parallel as we move forward. That's why we are already talking about African passport, free movement of people, and so on. So when we look at all these communities, we find that East African community has moved fastest. We say who has moved fastest within a given time. East African community has moved very fast. But IGAD is moving fast on regional infrastructure. ECOWAS on the free movement of people, but also on macroeconomic and financial management considerations. SADC too has a lot of intra-regional trade and also financial and macroeconomic performance. So all these ranks have performed well, at least in one facet or another. Let me give you an example. Now in East Africa, they have just abolished roaming charges, and the volume of cross-border calls has just zoomed up. So operators have more than made up for the loss that they had when they eliminated the tariffs. That is integration. In Central Africa, I'm aware that they have harmonized or standardized academic qualification. One can give several examples, but there is no time. But the point I was making is that integration is a big element of transforming that transformative growth, contributing to transformative growth. They go hand in hand. And it has always been the major goal, the ultimate goal of the African Union. That's why we say we want integrated, and then we go on with our vision, but integration is the first one that is mentioned. Madam Chair, I'll stop here.
Thank you very
Moderator.
much, Excellency. We really enjoyed listening to some of these very technical, deep explanations on economic issues, including some of the activities that are undertaken under your department, Excellency. Now I'll open the floor to the journalists to ask questions on your introduction. I can see many hands. I used to start this way. Let me start now that way. Second, third, fourth, and sixth. And we'll take a second round. Introduce yourself and...
Right. My name is Badibanga, journalist for Mama Radio in DRC. Excusez-moi en tout cas maintenant, mon accent d'anglais il est très faible. Excusez-moi. Je préfère poser la question ou mes deux petites questions en français. En fait, vous avez évoqué en passant tout justement la question de la monnaie ou de la dévalorisation de la monnaie nationale locale par rapport au dollar. Maintenant, la question est de savoir, pensez-vous qu'il est nécessaire aujourd'hui d'aller vers une monnaie unique en Afrique, au regard, bien entendu, de ces constats selon lesquels le dollar semble prendre le dessus sur la monnaie locale? La dernière question, c'est celle de savoir justement, dans le cadre de l'agenda 2063, quels sont d'autres secteurs clés ou vitaux de développement, à part l'agriculture, sur lesquels l'Afrique peut compter pour transformer ou booster son économie? Merci. La première question, c'est par rapport à la dévalorisation de la monnaie locale face au dollar. Est-ce qu'il est extrêmement nécessaire aujourd'hui d'aller vers une monnaie unique en Afrique? Merci. Voilà. Et la deuxième question, c'est justement au sujet de l'agenda 2063, au-delà de l'agriculture. Y a-t-il d'autres secteurs vitaux de développement sur lesquels l'Afrique peut compter pour éventuellement transformer ou booster son économie?
The second question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Collins Moy. I write for the New Times Daily. It's a local English daily. Mine is on the current funding and the funding of the future. So currently, as much as we would like to have the Agenda 2063 actualized, it largely depends on if it's being funded by African economies as opposed to donors and development partners. So I'd like to know currently what's the revenue, or how much is contributed by African countries as you stand, and how much is contributed by donors, and what's the rationale of contributions? Does every country have a certain number, and maybe how much is Rwanda say expected to contribute every year, and what are the alternative sources of funding? Because you and other experts have talked about pursuing alternative sources of funding as opposed to donors and as opposed to donor dependence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, your neighbor.
Thank you. Nicholas Long, Voice of America. I'd like to ask about the Continental Free Trade Area. What are the next steps or the next targets for this goal? You said that setting the common external tariff would normally come before getting rid of internal tariffs. Is there a goal for or is there a date set for when there should be a common external tariff? Is there a date set for when internal tariffs should be reduced? And is the goal to reduce them to zero, or to what level? We were told that that 2017 is the year when something is expected to have been achieved on this, but I'm not quite sure what.
Thank you. Yes, behind you, Patrick. Let's finish with this side. Yeah, then we're gonna.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Fola Shade Folarin from the News Agency of Nigeria. As a follow-up question to what my colleague from the Voice of America just asked, we seem to want to have, common grounds and all, but considering that we all have varying degrees of development, some are developing, some are almost there. Then in the midst of all of that, we still have conflicts in some of all these countries. Now, what are the immediate measures that you're going to put, or that the AU is going to put in place to, make all of these things happen? Because really, for me, all of this happening within a short period of time, I really don't see it. I'm sorry, I'm not very, about it, but then that's just the way I feel. So please, what are the measures that are going to put in place to ensure that all of these things happen in the shortest period? Thank you.
Do you think we can allow the commissioner to answer those few questions? Then we take this round of questions. Do you think? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the questions.
Excellent. The first question.
Which can Africa?
The evolution of the USD and the African currency. Because as the price of the dollar is the price. So how can we handle the unit transit? And the other one was about agriculture and the other transformative sectors.
Through agriculture and others.
Let's listen to
from DRC about evaluation of local currencies because the dollar went up. Is it necessary to go towards a common currency? It would be a good thing. In fact, that is in the works. That's why we have in the works, in the Constitutive Act, actually, we have Pan-African financial institutions, African Investment Bank, African Monetary Fund, and African Central Bank. Not tomorrow, but they are in the work. We are working towards that. No, I mean, there is work really making sure that there is, the preconditions are being met, because you have to have economic convergence, macroeconomic convergence, and other requirements to have a single currency. That's why you saw when Greece was having difficulties in the management of its macro economy, that there was a lot of talk about will they get out of the Eurozone or something like that. Because to have common currency, there are certain preconditions, including management. Now, common currency, it would help because it would make trade within the region easier, within the continent much easier, because we will be having a common currency. And I presume with maybe a more developed Africa and so large, then it will be a strong currency against the rest of other currencies. So it may itself be more resilient to shocks and volatility out there. Although sometimes it's just that there is no demand out there, but under normal circumstances, when your currency goes down, sometimes it's advantageous in that your exports become cheaper for the foreigners, so you can export a lot, and their imports may be expensive, so you may import less, and so your external current account may just improve. But now, even with low currency, since there is no demand out there, it doesn't help very much. There was the question of agriculture. Do we have other transformative? Yes, agriculture, industry, or manufacturing or things like that, and services sector. As I said, more services, a variety of services that you offer. So there is scope for transformation in other sectors, diversification and value addition that can go on, increase productivity and so on. Yeah, is what continue the free trade, or it was they were the ones that followed. Yeah, I think there were two questions about continental free trade area, where the target is 2017. No, that is a target for negotiations, that by then it is hoped that the negotiation will have been concluded and we know how, because following that there has to be modalities of how then do we implement this agreement. So, I mean, there are phases to this thing. Now, let's not mix them. I said the first stage normally is what we call preferential trade area. That means members give one another preferential tariffs. Preferential tariffs. But they are tariffs, but they are preferential. But in a free trade area, it means among members there is no tariff at all. It's free. That's why it's free trade area. It's free. But each member can still charge the others certain duties. You know, the third parties can be charged any duties. But if it's a customs area, there is what is called common external tariff. So among you, there is no duty at all. But to outsiders, you have common tariff, or by tariff lines, you know, the different products. That's what the customs union is all about. Then you graduate to common market, and then to economic community, and to the union. My sister from Nigeria was saying, but countries are at different levels of development. No, it's done all the time. Even the EU did that. You know, the East European countries, and at the beginning when Portugal came, it was one of those that were relatively poor, and Spain later, Ireland, but they grew very fast as a result of being part of the whole. And a lot of central, former socialist European countries also joined. They were in a poor state. Even East Germany became very well off when they merged with West Germany. So actually, it is a way of boosting those who are weak, integration. It has that benefit. So maybe we can have a few more.
Let's take the other set of questions. You want a follow-up question?
Oh, yeah.
You didn't answer your question.
About financing. No, I mean, there is scope for raising domestic revenue. There is scope for raising more domestic revenue. So that's why we talk of domestic resource mobilization. Because as the economy, you know, the economy is something very dynamic. As it grows and grows and grows, and the informal sector, although they still call themselves informal sector, you find that they've actually de facto graduated to become formal. There is scope. It means the tax bases are there, but you will find that our tax structure is archaic. It was aimed at a certain tax basis, and it no longer applies to the new basis. So you have to review your tax basis, analyze your economy, and adjust your tax structure accordingly so that it can latch on to the real tax basis. Tax basis is where you get the revenue, you tax and get the revenue. So there is scope for that in a lot of our countries. So tax reform and capacity to administer that properly becomes very important. Then there's this question of stopping illicit financial outflows from Africa. which the report of President Beg had put at 50 billion at the time when he wrote that report 2 years ago. But now with more scrutiny, it has been found that actually it's more like 80 billion that is flowing out of Africa illicitly. And illicit outflows is not necessarily all illegal. Some is illegal, but when we say illicit, it means it's improper. You remember not too long ago, President Obama refused permission to one company that wanted to locate in Ireland because taxes were cheaper there. Then he said, no way, you stay here and pay taxes. So you see, that was not illegal. It was going to be legal if the president didn't make an order to stop it. But it may be improper because it's running away from paying legitimate tax. So not only, so that's why tax reforms and good agreements with investors, particularly in the extractive industry, and many other things, our customs officers have to check mispricing and valuations and so on, and profit shifting and all these things. If they are contained, you would find that the tax basis will become deeper. You will have a deeper pocket from which to tax, and you'll raise more revenue. But then you remember what I said? I said, unlike the previous frameworks, which were just implemented by the public, Agenda 2063 is public, it's private sector, it's civil society. So the private sector is expected to play a role and is already playing a major role, because some of the infrastructure projects are actually a good business. You can invest in an electricity plant, sell that energy at a profit. Why not? And some are doing that. Some firms or companies are building major roads, and they pull toll gates and collect the revenue. The highway is there, you pay the toll, you use it, it's an investment. Or bridges with a toll. I remember in Abidjan they've just built one. It was privately actually constructed, joining the two parts of the city so that you don't have to go around, you just go straight to another place. That was done by the private sector. They are collecting toll. It's an investment. So private sector is participating in development. But there is also that model, the old model of build, operate, and transfer, where the private sector would build something, operate to recoup their investment, and then transfer to the public. And then there are PPPs, public-private partnerships, where you are always advised to be very careful about the agreement, because private companies can afford very smart lawyers, and if the agreement is not right, the government may get the short end of the stick. So in as long as we have good lawyers also and make sure that the agreement is okay, you'll find that you'll manage. So there are all these ways of raising. And then there's remittances, management of remittances, which is now recognized as a viable means of investment. Some countries are selling development bonds to the diaspora. They buy bonds. I mean, because it's private. Remittances are private. It belongs to the people who are remitting. And then they buy development bonds, which, of course, the government would repay later after development has been achieved. So there are so many ways.
Are you satisfied with your...
Yeah.
Contributing at the moment. How countries contribute money to the African Union funding at the moment? How do they do that? And maybe what is the ratio between local and African funding and development partners funding?
No, the bulk, frankly, the bulk of the payment is made by the partners, but there is a move to moderate that greatly. There is a formula that has been agreed. I think on operations it's 100%, and then on other things about 75%, then 25% on peace and security, at least. Because peace and security is still a global thing, it's still an international thing, wherever it takes place. So we still hope that partners can come in, they can chip in on that one. And you are in luck, sir, because actually the thrust of this summit is for heads of state to address that. So maybe by the end of this week, you will have good news about how our heads of state and government have decided to tackle this. But the decision has been made that peace and security at least 25%, and 75% on programs and other things, and then for operational things, daily administrative things, 100%, which is a move from what it was in the past.
Okay, let's go to the second and last rounds of questions. I'll take you, and one. We have.
Thank you very much. Once again, Rodrigue Guiraira is my name. Professor, one question I wanted to ask, my colleague has just hinted on it, but I don't think we really got that clear picture of the state of finance at the AU, which is still underfunded by the member states themselves. Are we optimistic that we can reach to a stage where we can finance ourselves without relying to the external donation from the Western community? Can AU member state finance its own operations and activities at the AU level? Maybe as you respond to that, my question was, how can we contain or keep afloat African growing and promising economies? We've seen the rises of some, which subsequently also plunged, and you know these shakeups that happens within times. How can we contain them, and how can we do so through blocks, through regional blocks? We are seeing some major shakeups, like you've just mentioned the Brexit. Very many people no longer have confidence in blocks. They want to pull out and go solo. We are also seeing, like my friend earlier said, the bullish dollar against other currencies, basically all that. And how does it affect really the growing of the promising economy in Africa, and how can we let them stay afloat?
Thank you. Let's get the next question. Send it to your stream. All right. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Irene Kimenya. I work with Rwanda Broadcasting Agency, RBA. My friend just talked about Brexit. Doctor, I just want to give us your comment. Don't you think that Brexit will discourage most of the countries for integration? Because they might think that those countries which are economically powerful might think that others are benefiting from them. Another one, you talked about East African community. I just want to know, why do you say that East African community is performing well? And I would like to hear from you about your reaction about Northern Corridor, because we see it is very active, even more than East African community. What's your reaction about that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Behind you, the mic. Andre, present yourself, please.
Yes, merci. Mon nom c'est André Gakwaya. Je travaille pour l'agence rwandaise d'information et le journal Grand Lac Hebdo. Ma question est particulière. Je voudrais que monsieur le commissaire puisse nous aider. Nous parlons d'intégration, mais en réalité, maintenant, je ne peux pas aller en Afrique du Sud parce que je ne peux pas avoir de visa pour l'Afrique du Sud. J'ai essayé d'y aller dans une réunion à Durban sur les forêts 3 fois, mais je n'ai pas pu obtenir de visa. Je n'ai pas pu obtenir de visa. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a un désaccord entre l'Afrique du Sud et le Rwanda. Il y a un désaccord diplomatique qui n'est pas encore terminé. et nous en sommes victimes. D'abord, aujourd'hui, seulement les Rwandais qui ont un passeport du gouvernement peuvent aller en Afrique du Sud. Mais ceux qui sont dans le privé, les hommes d'affaires, les médias privés, la société civile, ceux qui peuvent aller faire des visites familiales, et ceux qui peuvent aller faire le business, ils ne peuvent pas, parce qu'ils ne peuvent pas obtenir de visa. Et alors, nous sommes des frères, deux pays frères africains. L'intégration doit marcher absolument. Alors, monsieur le commissaire, vous pourriez bien conseiller à nos responsables rwandais et sud-africains de régler ce désaccord parce que c'est un obstacle à l'intégration. C'est un grand obstacle. Et jusqu'à présent, on dirait que la question qui a été réglée, ça avantage seulement ceux qui ont le passeport diplomatique. Mais ceux qui ont le visa privé, plutôt le passeport privé, ils ne peuvent pas y aller. Alors, vous comprenez que c'est compromettre la libre circulation des biens des personnes d'une plus grande partie de la population. Et quand Ramaphosa Cyril était ici récemment dans le World Economic Forum, we have put the question that problem to him. He has said that the solution is in processes, is to be solved, but it was a diplomatic solution. Nothing has been solved until now. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from behind. Francois, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Francois Ndengwe. Your Excellency, when we plan, we're looking forward, and as we are Africans, we plan with regard to the rest of the world. The African population will be around 20% by the middle of the century. Now, is our industrial production going to be 20%, to be at least commensurate, and what can we do in this regard? My second question is this one. You've mentioned the issue of implementation, monitoring and evaluation in terms of the different goals that we're pursuing. And we know that to implement all these goals, there is the issue of finance. And rightfully, you mentioned the statutes of the African Union in 2002 or 2000, if I'm not wrong, Article 19 on the 3 financial institutions. How is it that we are not mentioning in this regard the progress towards the establishment of this? Why is it that nothing is said concretely in terms of monitoring and evaluating the steps toward these institutions? And also, if we're talking about economy, we need to talk about employment. It is very difficult to have accurate figures in terms of unemployment in our continent. And if we have to have an economy that is really a working economy, we have to need a labor policy. And the labor policy means to have you to follow how you are providing jobs and what is the level of unemployment. Otherwise, we will be still talking and talk. So my question in this regard is this one. When are we going to set, whether on the national levels or the REX, as you say, or on the continental level, a labor policy that will allow rulers to know exactly what is the level of unemployment, and more than that, the level of the rate of inactivity? Because I'm saying this question comes to my mind when you were talking about the full employment in the US. Of course, if you go to look the census, the statistic there, they will say 4% or 5%. But what if you go and look down, this figure is even not accurate, because currently there are almost 100 million people who are not seeking jobs anymore, and they are not considered unemployed. So the level of the rate of inactivity is very, very high, meaning that they have not solved the problem yet. And finally, you are also very, very right to talk about the illicit and the difference between illicit flow and illegal flow. Now, what are we doing concretely? You know that there is what we call the unity of responsibility of control. If this a matter that is going to be controlled by the African Union or by the national states, what are they doing concretely? Because to act here, you need to have a judicial system that is powerful enough to chase the money and to bring back to collect back what has escaped the country. Is this going to be a matter monitored by the African Union or the national government? Because you need capacity to follow all this money, because there are multiple actors in between. And I will finish, if you can, I don't know if you can answer the last question. We have a very concrete, and which will go back to the question that was asked regarding dollars. We have a concrete example here of how the absence of unity in terms of monetary policy is weakening our continent, so that even a slight mismanagement in a way or another of the US dollars could hit out very hard. And what example is the case of Zimbabwe? Do you have any idea of how we can manage the monetary issue in Zimbabwe today? Thank you.
Wow, we have very highly qualified experts as media in this room today. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your questions. There are many. I think the follow-up question to my friend who has just left by you was, can, you use the word can African countries do? Yes, they can. Can is what you are able to do. They are able to do it. But maybe what you wanted to say was, are they willing? Or are they committed to doing it? So can, yes, they can. Willing, we will find out at this summit, because that's the core of the summit. So we will see that political commitment. Ups and downs of the economies. You know what I call them? I call them yo-yo economies. You know yo-yo when you play down, the yo-yo. Actually, it's precisely the point that I was talking about at the beginning. It's because of reliance on a narrow band of. So when there is a price boom, economies seem to be doing very well. You know, the GDP looks very good. And then when there is a price bust of commodities, then it goes down. Because it's not so much because there is more production, or because there is anything, it's just the price. Sometimes I also call them balloon economies. And that's what we want to go away from. Because in any case, they are misleading in a number of ways. One, most of it is extractive industry. And most of the extractive industry, and as a fact, it's usually owned by transnationals, you know, by international firms. So if they have made a profit, they repatriate their profits, isn't it? What they live here, maybe some, if it's mining, maybe some royalties, some employment, some taxes, but that's about it. But the billions go to the shareholders, to the headquarters, right? So GDP looks good, but what trickles within the economy is very little, because the bulk is taken away. Take Zambia, for instance. During the difficult times, IMF squeezed them to sell their copper mines at giveaway price. And the copper prices were very low. Well, then they regained. Now, each time they regain their value, everybody looks at the GDP of Zambia and say, wow, you know, Zambia is really rolling. But those mines are external. I'm giving just an example. There are other examples that we can go. It means that the profits are expatriated. They don't benefit the people inside. So it's a balloon economy. A balloon, because if you take a pin to a balloon and what happened to my balloon? Where is it? Where is it? And you find a small piece somewhere. Boom, it's gone. So that's the reasons. And that's why transformation now takes us to another dimension where we are talking about real economy, the growth of real job-creating economy with value addition in the country, with diversification in the country. That's why we want transformation. Brexit, I wonder whether it's because of lack of gains that they did that more than political considerations. I had one man who was being interviewed. Well, the others were regretting, oh, they misled us. We wanted our country back. We didn't know what it means. And so, but the older man who knew what he was doing, he was saying, yeah, we were worried because, we started as an economic, joint effort. Now they were beginning to talk about federalism and all that, the political side. So no, then we wanted our country back. So now you see that's more political than economic. That was a political decision. Yeah, I think there was something about EAC doing well, and then but Northern Corridor seems to be doing well. Northern Corridor, I think, is a road, is an infrastructure, isn't it? It's infrastructure within some of them. Maybe it's within IGAD or something. No, we collected data, and according to the data that we collected, East African community is doing well. But I said different regional economic communities are doing well in one aspect or the other. Some are doing well in trade, some are doing well on macroeconomic and financial issues, some are doing well in infrastructure or specific infrastructure. So it differs. It's a mixed bag. So that's the way it is. And I would encourage you to look at the index that has been produced jointly by the African Union Commission and UNICA and African Development Bank as a joint project. There is index that has been, and a lot of statistics. This one has to do with the question on
integration, free movement of people, and especially the case of South Africa and Rwanda. They have difficulties. So, what do you advise with the Pan-African passport?
Actually, they are opposites. It's easy to get into Rwanda. If you are an African, you get visa on entry, right? And then you can apply online and so on. Whereas in South Africa, maybe it's hard. Maybe they are considering and so on. But the move is one of the fast-track projects to have free movement of people, of Africans, from one African country to the other, and ending up with an African passport. Now my friend, he has gone there, he would say, can we do it? Yes, we can. And it's shown by ECOWAS, because in ECOWAS, if you are from ECOWAS, you can move freely from one ECOWAS country to the other. It can be done. And it's one of the areas where the African Union is pushing very hard to expedite. And since then, a number of countries have loosened up their requirements, and we will see that continuing until we achieve that project. So, so it will be done. It can be done. It will be done. There is already progress towards that. The difficult question by Professor, my fellow professor, a good friend of mine there, Francois Dengue. That's what I always warn people when they say, Africa rising, hey, hooray, jumping about, organizing a party, Africa is rising. Yes, Africa is rising, but we have to be cautious because, number one, African population is growing very fast, precisely as you are saying. We are chasing, they don't realize, they say fastest growing in the world. Yes, but you have to be fastest growing in the world because your population is also fastest growing. The other populations are aging populations and even going down. So to keep people, you have to run faster and faster to chase that population, actually. And then I talked about that thing of repatriation. We are not saying there shouldn't be repatriation, but we want growth of the real economy, real job-creating economy. And that's why you even refer to labor, actually. So, because job creation, the inclusive growth that involves people is what will tackle poverty and take us away from poverty. So we are wishing for, with this transformation, for the growth of the real economy, not the balloon economy, not the yo-yo, up, down, boom, bust economy. We want to run away from that. But you are correct. Our statistics are very rudimentary, and labor statistics are very difficult, even in developed countries, because first of all, how do you define unemployment? And what about people who are partially employed, part-time, and all that? No, it's difficult, and it is always difficult everywhere, even in developed countries. You are totally correct. But working with ILO, who have been working in this area since time immemorial, we think we can do that. But we are also, as the African Union Commission, as the African Union, trying to tackle this by improving statistics. Our statisticians are very well organized. We invite you to their meetings twice a year. We always meet them. We are going to have there are training institutes in statistics already in place, regional, national. But we are going to have a Pan-African one in Yamoussoukro to train people, to supplement the efforts that are already made to train people in statistics. We are going to have a statistics institute in Tunisia to work with there are already existing institutions, to put all together to try to improve the quality. So it's really the aim of the African Union to have quality statistics. And what do we mean by quality statistics? We mean that the scope should be adequate. We mean that the accuracy should be there. They should be dependable. They should be reliable statistics. We mean that we should get those figures in time. No, they shouldn't be stale and of no use, because we will then be dealing with the past rather than the present going forward. So they have to be timely statistics. That's what we mean by quality statistics. That's our objectives. And we have the project through African Charter on Statistics. We have a harmonization of statistics in Africa so that the figures mean the same thing all over Africa. Right now it is not. You know, we may use the same name, same item, but it means the same, a different thing elsewhere, slightly different thing. So we are pushing with SHASA, that harmonization of statistics here in Africa. We are pushing that forward. So statistics is one of the areas that we realize, frankly, you are right, we are weak, and we are trying to do something about it. A very concrete things. The monitoring and evaluation and the continental financial institutions in Article 19. Actually, on the African Central Bank, we work with the governors of Central Bank, Association of African Central Banks. We met in Dakar. Before that, we met in Malabo. And we are trying to improve. Now there is a movement forward, because of course you are not just going to plunge into African Central Bank. There has to be. It has never been done anywhere. There are preconditions and co-conditions or requisites that have to be met. So we have to work on macroeconomic convergence, and we were discussing these issues in Malabo last year and this year, early this year. Was it in March? Yeah, early March. We were in Dakar. We were hosted by BCIO there. By the way, he's joined this Association of African Central Banks. and the African Union Commission through, of course, the Economic Affairs Department. And we are making, there are people who are working on the revision of the convergence and so on. There is a movement, slow, but there is some. I wish it was faster, quite frankly. But there is something that is being done. The African Monetary Fund is very new. We have just finished the statutes, so we are working on the host agreement. I think after this summit, I'm sure within a month, we will have finished with the host, and then we take it from there now for signing and ratification, which should be in Yaoundé. So there is a movement, yes, at snail's pace. We no longer say glacial or because the glaciers are moving very fast because of climate change. So they've been devalued now. We no longer say things are moving at the rate of the glaciers. At least we should talk about snails. So maybe you can say a snail's pace in slow motion, or maybe even a sick or old snail, very slow. But there is a movement, at least there is a movement. And Agenda 2063 is to prop that up a little bit, to make things move faster, much faster than they are now. The most difficult question, IFF, hey, there is a lot on IFF. In fact, if my sister here gives me another chance for another time, a short time, Hamdok and I would like to brief them on the work we are doing on IFF with President Beg. Now there is something happening. Hey, we are working very hard. I want to assure you. Yeah. So there will be a brief on that. I think it's a subject that we should really talk about. I must confess I'm even exhausted myself. But how to run Zimbabwe? The Minister of Finance the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Zimbabwe is here with his officials. I plead that questions on how to manage the economy in Zimbabwe is directed to the delegation of Zimbabwe, because I don't want to misinterpret. I'm not in Zimbabwe now. I don't want to give you, I respect you too much to give you wrong information. At least deliver it. So.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for this very in-depth knowledge on economic and the status of economic in Africa. Mulalet, please take note that the Commissioner would like to have another press briefing anytime, and let's take
IFF.
it. Yeah, on IFF. With Mr. Amdok of the ECA. And the Commissioner is also very open to interviews at any time on one-on-one. Please, for those who want to ask, who want to submit a request for interviews, we are very open. But before we leave, please, Excellency, I want just to highlight some of the media event that will be taking place here tomorrow. It will still be a closed session of the Executive Council tomorrow, but in the morning, maybe I think from 9 o'clock, we'll have the African Editors Forum on the popularization of Agenda 2063. They are here, all the 54 countries represented, and including the diaspora. We want you to also attend this event. Then we'll have our first press briefing of the day tomorrow at 8:45 to 9:45, and it will be the Excellency Louise Mushikiwabo, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the government of Rwanda, and she will be addressing the media on the summit report, the regional integration, the African passport, the elections of the Commission, the ICC versus President Bashir. And please, we really want you to take note, because we want you to attend this press conference. Then the second press conference of the day tomorrow will be at 11 o'clock to 11:30. And this will be with Excellency Dr. Martial de Paul Ikunga, Commissioner for Human Resources, Science and Technology. He will be addressing you on harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in the youth. The third press conference of the day will be from 12 noon to 12:30. It will be Her Excellency Dr. Aisha Abdullahi, Commissioner for Political Affairs, and she will be talking about 2016, the African Year of Human Rights, with a particular focus on the rights of women, which is the theme of the summit and the theme of the year. And the last conference of the day will be Mr. Amin Idris Adum, who is the Director of Administration and Human Resource Management of the African Union. He will be addressing you on the administrative reforms of the African Union and the African Union Leadership Academy. With that, we say we have come to the close of this press conference of the day. We want to thank you all for being present. We want to thank the live stream team for making this live to the world. We want to thank His Excellency Dr. Anthony Maruping for coming here to address the media on some of the pending issues on economy in the continent. Please, thank you, Excellency. Do you have any last words?
No.
Thank you very much for coming.
To thank you and to thank the members of the media who came this afternoon. I was just thanking her for the opportunity and thanking you for coming for this dialogue. I really enjoyed this dialogue, and we hope there will be another opportunity in the future. Thank you very much.
So let's call it a day today, and then we'll come every time that we can make you busy. We'll keep you busy with a lot of content on the activities of the African Union. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, man.
It was a pleasure, Excellency. Well done.
Yes.
C'est moi qui vous remercie. Vous êtes des experts en économie.
J'écris beaucoup sur l'économie. Merci beaucoup.
Of course, you need that. Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
You say the EAC has moved faster.
Pardon?
EAC has moved faster. Which areas?
This is correct. Will you use
They are all correct, but it's an easier.